Apparently we are streaming right now. Alright everyone, Zach Osborne with Rogers Urban Farm Lab with another update. Today we are going to learn how to process large amounts of mushrooms all at once. I put the bag inside. I was not ready to stream. Good Lord. Alright. Actually, I guess that's all I need. Alright. So, step one. I've already processed a lot of the mushrooms. So we have two varying stages to make it nice and efficient. These are standard gray oyster mushrooms. They've gotten a little bit on the ratty side because they've already been sitting in a brown paper bag for a day or two in a fridge. I'd say you got about 3 days for oyster mushrooms to be optimal after you pick them, which really isn't all that much. That's why you don't see a lot of oyster mushrooms in grocery stores. They wouldn't survive the transport from where they're grown to where they're sold, and certainly not back to the house where they're eaten. So when we produce them, we need a way to go through and extend that shelf life. So what we're going to do is we're going to cook them down, get rid of a lot of that moisture content, as well as break down the mushrooms, because mushrooms are very tough. They produce a very unique type of carbohydrate that makes digestion by us humans very difficult. A lot of people get really bad indigestion if they don't cook mushrooms down properly before they eat them. I am certainly one of those. I cannot eat mushrooms raw. So it's really important to do this, especially if you want to also have it be less time consuming. Let's say you want a little bit of mushrooms in your quesadilla. Well, those mushrooms will take a lot longer to cook down than it is to melt some cheese in between two tortillas. And so this is a way that you have it already ready to go. And so they all have these little, I guess you could call them stems, that were attached to, you can even see little bits of straw maybe in there. It needs a little bit of light. Where's the light thing on this one? So you can see, oh, that just kind of washes it out, not the best light. Hey, there we go. So you can see little pieces of straw in there. So we're going to chop off this little back part. So now we have a little stub. And if you really want to get fancy with it and explore, you can actually try to regrow more mushrooms from this. And you can use, well, I'll refer to our other mushroom making videos with Will Tanaka for more information on that. But this is what we're left with, is mostly just the actual, I don't know, paddles. I don't know what to call them. Probably should have done some vocabulary research. And so I have two different methods of processing them. I have a food processor right here, which is, if you're trying to do large quantities, I highly recommend. The problem with the food processor is sometimes it may liquefy it down a little bit more than people want. And so if you want to use your food processor but still maintain big chunks, you got to make sure you don't overfill your food processor, because otherwise it'll, obliterate everything on the lower layer while leaving chunks on the top still bouncing around. And so you can use a knife as well, and I usually just cut it into strips, and then after cutting it into strips, I just turn it the other way, and I'm left with, these sized cubes. This is usually the largest I'll go with it. I'd say that these are maybe 1/4 inch or something like that. You can go smaller, you can go bigger. It really comes down to what state you like consuming it in. The important part is we're cooking them down and getting them ready. So I've got multiple pans here as an example. Let me show you what happens when you put it through the blender. I apologize for the audio. So with the blender, personally, I like them really fine. I probably take it a little bit too far though. Like, it's pretty much like sawdust. Maybe, well, not sawdust exactly. One step, one grain above that. Let's call it a 1/16 of an inch. So I got my pans heated up here, and I wouldn't recommend mixing matching different sizes. That's going to be problematic because then it's going to cook at different rates. So whatever size you go with, make it consistent. What I did here is I just have 2 pans going that are warm for the different examples. So I'm going to have this one little cluster that I'm chopping up with my knife right now. Wish there was a way to, maybe I can, ooh, let's get some zoom action. I don't have a cameraman here with me today, so, ooh yeah, there we go. So I'm just going to go through. This knife's a little small, so we can always upgrade if need be. Just kind of madly whipping in there and just chopping up any big chunks that I see. They're irregular shapes, so they don't exactly like to stay put. So I put that onto the pan. Little pan there. I actually have these little shavings I'm just going to stick in there. I'm going to put my big one in this guy right here. It's honestly kind of overkill, but I want to have some good examples. I also want to cook these all at once instead of waiting. So now, this is important. Well, actually, what's more important is I get the camera recentered. All right. There we go. So this is important. We have to make sure that we steam them before we do anything. Because what happens is, because of the, oh, I never pronounced this right, the chitin in the mushrooms, that is a calcium-based porous structure that gives the mushrooms their shape, also turns it into a very, very adsorbent sponge for liquids. And so what we have to do is we have to basically seal it. And what this does is it keeps oil from being sucked in during our frying step, which is no bueno, because then it basically becomes these sponges full of oil. It gets really gummy, gets really chewy, and it doesn't even really, you know, not all that healthy. And so by sort of steaming it first, we seal it up, and that way the oil stays on the outside of the mushroom, maintaining the actual mushroom texture that we want on the inside. And so it is steaming, so that's exactly what we're going to do. There we go. Little makeshift thing there. Now over here, I have an example of something that's already been steamed for a while. Now what I'm doing is I'm cooking off all the moisture, basically drying it out really good. So I added a little bit too much water, so it's taking a little bit too long, because the mushrooms themselves already have a lot of water content on them. If you just seal them up, a lot of times there's already enough water to create all the steam that you need. And so I supplement with just ever so much, a little bit, just to make sure, because again, you don't want to have any dry spots or anything like that where some mushrooms are starting to cook at an unequal rate to everything else. It's a big thing. So that's doing pretty good. That's cooking down. I think that's enough that we can add the oil, because moisture content will still cook off even if there's oil in there with it. Oh, I almost forgot. Since we are cooking off liquid, we've got to get some salt. Always helps speed up the process, and you're going to end up wanting to add salt into it with whatever you're going to be eating it with anyway, so you might as well go ahead and skip ahead and aid in your evaporation. There we go. There we go. So let's let that go through another steam step before we add the oil. So there we go. Those are looking nice and steamy. I'm going to turn up the heat. Mushrooms are very resistant. You can sit there and watch them get nuked for a while and they won't change shape, color, or anything like that. I did not think through this little plate seal idea very much. Should have used a slightly larger one. And you can tell when they're steamed, they're going to have a little bit more of a floppy, bendy look to them. When they're big chunks like this, they retain their texture a lot more. So if you're a fan of the rubbery taste, well, I probably shouldn't call it rubbery. That's kind of denigrates. If you'd like a good chewy sensation with your mushrooms, or here, we'll call it firm. No, maybe firm's the wrong word. I'll let the comment section decide if there is one. Usually isn't, but hey. So we're gonna let that steam a little more. Go one size up on a plate and sealing it up. That's much better. Go figure, the cast iron ceramic is already nice and hot and steaming it away. So now we're just gonna cook off the moisture. And while it's cooking off that moisture, it's gonna help break down that mushroom. Because again, some people have issues digesting the specific sugars that are made by mushrooms. Trying to walk and chew bubblegum at the same time here. Alright, back to this other one. It's to the point now where I'm kicking it around. It's kind of got this certain dryness to it. It's kind of starting to change colors as well, indicating it's starting to break down. I think that's enough to add a little bit of oil. Your choice of oil. I'm adding peanut oil today because I use basically peanut oil anytime I want to retain the taste of whatever it is that I'm cooking with. Like things like salad, I'm okay with using something like olive oil because there's not a whole lot of flavor going on with lettuce, especially if it's a really bitter type of lettuce. But with the mushroom, I want to really taste the full taste of the mushroom, and I always find that peanut oil is the best to do that with. So I'm just going to kind of mush it out, that way it's all evenly, tamp down the edges, so it makes a nice little mat. That way everyone's getting the same amount of heat and the same amount of nice, perfect contact with it. And there we go. That's pretty much it. And so what you're going to see is, because I'm going to take out a finished product out of the fridge so you guys don't have to sit here and watch paint dry, so to speak, is I started off with this entire bag full I tells ya, of mushrooms. I'd say it was maybe about, there we go, humanize this more, there we go. I'd say this is about 2 pounds of mushrooms. Took me about, 5 minutes to process it. I've got 2 big pans right here that'll take maybe, 5 minutes of steaming, another 15 minutes of actually breaking down. I like to full on caramelize it with the oil until it starts to turn golden brown. And that, takes 15, 20 minutes, maybe even more depending on what your heat is set at. Can even go as long as a half hour. Really low heat over a full hour I've done one time to really get a good caramelization in there. I don't know if I recommend that. Again, that's for you to explore. And then it shrinks down to, gosh, we'll be able to fit this inside of this container right here. Here we go. Yeah, that's right. Not even, let's see, what is that? 4 inches by not even 2 inches deep. This is a pound of mushrooms right here. And this is about 2 pounds, so I think we'll be able to fit this entire bag transformed, there, to give people that sense of scale. This is turning into this. Pretty darn efficient of a process. I don't know if efficiency is the right word. I think the right word here is, oh my gosh, look at that water content in these mushrooms, that they can be cooked down to that small of a mass. So when you're paying top dollar for mushrooms, you're basically you're paying for water content. And that's also why dried mushrooms are so expensive. Because, you dry down like a reishi mushroom and you see it in the store, it's for big money. It's like, well, yeah, because once you dry it down, that's all your weight right there. They're charging you by pound, whether it's, dried or not. They're going to get their money's worth. So don't think because you're paying for dried mushrooms it's going to be cheaper. A lot of times dried mushrooms are cheaper than fresh mushrooms because of shelf life. If I'm, got 1,000 extra pounds of mushrooms and I don't know what to do with them, I can dry them and then save them for years to come to sell to people. Or I can try to move them all inside of 3 days. It's not really plausible. So the cast iron is already ready to go. And you can tell because it'll start to kind of glue itself to the bottom of the container. And it'll kind of start to burn. And that's kind of your indication. You need to get that oil in there to kind of lube it up and provide the correct amount of I don't know, heat. I'm not sure how that works. If the oil helps like displace the heat, I need me some research into the thermodynamics of cooking to really get to the bottom of that. So there we go. We're going to start that process. This one's looking pretty good. Every now and then I'll go in there and kind of kick it around. I don't think I really needed to. I literally think that on fairly low heat, just enough to give it some sizzle, you can pretty much piece out for a good 5 to 10 minutes. And then come back, stir it, flip it around, see if it's starting to brown up. This stuff in this pan right here, I'm not seeing any browning whatsoever. Just kind of doing that tamp thing again, because the edges of the pan don't get as hot, especially since this is not a nice cast iron like this guy. I mean, really, I should have this quantity inside of that thing right there. Didn't plan that very well, did I? So turn the heat down in the cast iron since it is working so well. But same thing, I can probably leave that for a good 5-10 minutes. Mushrooms are super resistant to getting nuked, which is why they create such bad indigestion if you eat them raw. Ooh. All right. So yeah, that's properly steamed. Nice big chunks. So this would be if I wanted to, like let's say I'm a top ramen aficionado, and my meals have to be done in under 3 minutes, the exact time it takes for water to boil of that volume in a microwave. But you want to healthitize it or something like that. Now, sometimes some frozen peas and corn are really nice thrown into a top ramen, but this gives you a way to have fresh mushrooms, well, quote unquote fresh mushrooms, in your top ramen, and they're just right in the freezer or fridge. The best thing to do is to aliquot it out, and then that way you have doses that you can open up throughout the week and then put into the fridge so you don't have to worry about that thaw step, because that can be annoying. All right. So this one's properly steamed, so the top's off now. We're going to let it basically evaporate off all that little bit of steam, get it ready for the oil, and that's it. And you've all already seen the end product. It's kind of hard to tell, but it does have a bit of a golden brown. It's actually kind of hard to tell. Well, it did. And that's the tricky part about mushrooms, because they can be cooked down so much, it really does become subjective with when you want to stop. I suppose what you could do is you could take a little sample while it's cooking and eat some of it, and then decide if it's to a, I don't know, call it a toughness rating that is okay with you. It's really your call. But there you go. All the different steps. We got some finished stuff. We got the big chunks. And same thing, I'm just going to add just enough oil to coat the bottom, flip them around. You don't want to use too much oil, otherwise it's just going to make them gummy. Stuff like this is when you make it this fine, you can mix it with egg and you can make burger patties or sandwich patties out of them. The egg and the albumin in egg are just such good cohesive agents, whatever, that they really do work well. Using like bean curd or paste or whatever they do, like in those Impossible burgers, it's really hard to do. I don't know what type of sorcery they do in those vegan Impossible burgers. That's probably why they call them Impossible burgers, because they shouldn't exist. I try not to think about it nor purchase their products. I prefer do my own healthy, low-cost vegan cooking, because mushrooms are really easy to grow. If you produce mushrooms yourself, it's honestly ridiculous. When you're paying for mushrooms, you really are paying for the freshness. And so if they're mushrooms that are all ratty and torn up and someone still wants top dollar for them, just say, nah, I'm going to take that money and just go grow my own, honestly. So there you have it, folks. Oh, see, it's starting to kind of stick to the bottom of the pan, so that means the water content's cooking off. So it's about time to bust out the oil. I'm going to wrap it up, go make a nice little JPEG as a little thumbnail for the video, and we'll see you guys next time. Thank you very much.